The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily represent those of any organization, including One Generation Away.
The freedom of a people to choose its leaders is the root of liberty.
Keep alive this experiment in liberty.
Liberty, in case you've forgotten, is the soul's right to breathe.
Government should be very minimal in protecting liberty.
Peace cannot be purchased at the cost of liberty.
The sturdy ground of liberty.
Liberty once lost is lost forever.
Fight for their liberty and for our security.
Guarantees individual liberty.
This great republic, born alone in liberty.
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 Liberty. Liberty.
Just how much do you want liberty?
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner,
a production of LibertyNation.com.
cutting through the double talk, taking on the topics, going after what the politicians really mean, and making it all clear. For your freedom and your liberty. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
The most wacky, astonishing, damnable, and revealing statements of 2018 coming up on this year-end edition of Liberty Nation Radio. Welcome back into the show as we bid 2018 farewell and prepare for what's certain to be another tumultuous year of 2019. And so we will dive right into it with an expanded edition of our signature segment.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
All say what, all the time. We present our best of 2018 edition of Say What, a compilation of some of the most wacky, astonishing, and damnable statements of 2018. And it's not going to be just the most outrageous ones, but the most revealing ones. The things said that reveal the true beliefs, agenda, and intentions of those who utter them. And as you surely know, 2018 provided a target-rich environment for an ever more polarized nation between President Trump, his supporters, those who hate him with a passion to the point of being inflicted with TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, media bias to a level we've never before witnessed, and more. So, let's get this party started with media bias and the unprecedented bile spewed by the elite media toward a president who refuses to bow to them, calls them out as fake news, calls them the enemy of the people. Exhibit A would be the infamous Jim Acosta of CNN, who, in one of his many self-centered rants about the president, called Trump supporters gullible and lame-brained.
The problem is that people around the country don't know it's an act. They're not in on the act, and they take what he says very seriously, and they take attacks from Sean Spicer and Sarah Sanders and what they do to us on a daily basis very seriously. They don't have all their faculties in some cases. Their elevator might not hit all floors.
Well, that was consistent with one of the media themes of the year. Having failed to kneecap Trump himself, they went after his dim-witted supporters and their whiteness and their racism. Here's the most appropriately named man on TV, Don Lemon of CNN, saying no more demonization, and then proceeding to do exactly that himself.
We have to stop demonizing people and realize the biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized to the right. And we have to start doing something about them. There is no travel ban on them. There is no ban on, they had the Muslim ban. There is no white guy ban. So what do we do about that?
But it wasn't just white men. Kirsten Powers of CNN took aim at white women who voted for Trump.
They'll say, well, I'm not racist. I just voted for him because, I didn't like Hillary Clinton. And I just want to say that that doesn't make you not racist. It actually makes you racist.
So CNN turned male Trump supporters into terrorists and female Trump supporters into racists. A word that has lost its meaning from the rinse and repeat Trump deranged media. The volume of journalists who have sacrificed their reputations at the altar of Trump hatred is remarkable and ever growing. It includes the formerly respectable, now Trump-deranged Jeffrey Toobin of, is this sounding like a pattern, CNN. So deranged that he labeled the almost entirely white Antifa as the opposite.
Let's be clear also about what's going on here. The theme here is, I'm Donald Trump and I'll protect you from the scary black people. Antifa is widely perceived as an African-American organization, and this is just part of the same story of LeBron James and Don Lemon and Maxine Waters and the NFL players and the UCLA basketball players. This is about black versus white. This is about Donald Trump's appeal to racism.
Again, Antifa is almost all white. The year was marked by those White House press conferences with the president turned from reporters asking real questions to reporters making statements disguised as questions.
Hi, Mr. President. Yemi Shalsunder with PBS NewsHour. On the campaign trail, you called yourself a nationalist. Some people saw that as emboldening white nationalists. Now people are also saying
I don't know why you'd
that
say
the
that. It's such a racist
There
question.
are some people that say that now the Republican Party is seen as supporting white nationalists because of your rhetoric. What do you make of that?
I don't believe it. I don't know. Why do I have my highest poll numbers ever with African Americans?
Maybe because of a record low unemployment rate for blacks and Hispanics and women. But at least we might have expected that from a media that once denied their bias and now proudly wears it as a badge of honor. Less explicable are those never-Trump Republicans, the only Republicans employed by the legacy media, who continue to detest Trump even as he accomplishes one conservative objective after another. Witness the once respected George Will.
Donald Trump is an open book who's been reading himself to the country for 30 years. There are just no mysteries left. And he is this, as I said, this jumble of insecurities and partially or not at all really compensating vanities. He's a kind of mistake of nature.
George Will's invective was equaled by my personal choice for the single most insufferable person in the entire media. And that's saying something. The whiny, kvetching, so-called conservative from the Washington Post, Jennifer Rubin, talking about treasonous Republicans in Congress supporting their president.
These people have really betrayed their country. They know the person sitting with the nuclear codes with his finger literally on the button, as he keeps telling us, is unfit for the presidency, that he's mentally unfit, temperamentally unfit, and yet they kind of prop him out and push him up there and pretend that everything's okay and everything is not okay.
Then there was establishment Republican strategist Rick Wilson reacting to Trump's zero-tolerance policy at our southern border.
The pictures of the cruelty of this administration are a very deliberate part of this. They're a feature, not a bug, of the Trump administration's policy. No one inside the administration is unhappy about these things because their core supporters, want anybody who's darker than a latte deported.
But the Trump-deranged and never-Trump media were complemented by an equally deranged Hollywood, crushed by the Me Too movement, but carrying on with their virtue signaling and a seething hatred of the 45th president. This is the only clip you need to hear.
Ladies and gentlemen, Robert De Niro.
I'm going to say one thing. Trump. It's no longer down with Trump, it's Trump.
And to think how much I've loved that guy's movies. We will carry on with 2018's most wacky, astonishing, and damnable and revealing things uttered by politicians in the chattering class in just a moment.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
We believe that all men are entitled to blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
On we march with our year-end Say What. and just how far the left is willing to go to take down Donald Trump. Leftist icon Bill Maher says an economic meltdown would actually be welcome if it rids us of this horrible president.
This economy is going pretty well. I feel like the bottom has to fall out at some point. And by the way, I'm hoping for it because I think one way you get rid of Trump is a crashing economy. Yeah. So please bring on the recession. Yeah. Sorry if that hurts people, but it's either root for a recession or you lose your democracy.
Okay, there's the Left Circa 2018. Let's move on from pure hatred to hypocrisy. Remember the big scandal about Facebook having their data used by the Trump campaign? Well, 4 years earlier, Maxine Mad Max Waters bragged about exactly the same thing done by President Obama.
The president has put in place an organization that contains the kind of database that no one has ever seen before in life. That's going to be very, very powerful. That database will have information about everything on every individual in ways that it's never been done before.
Good for me, but not for thee. How about Obama himself, who took to the campaign trail with surprisingly uncertain footing? Witness this laundry list of stereotypical accusations and one head shaker he laid at the feet of his successor, struggling every step of the way.
We are still confused, blind, shrouded with hate, anger, racism, mommy issues. We are fraught with stuff.
Stuff. That was hardly the Obama of hope and change, more like fear and loathing. But he was hardly the only bitter leftist stripped of significance in the Trump era. The woman Trump vanquished kept showing up to make speeches, including a particularly bizarre one when Hillary Clinton said the coming catastrophic climate change is inherently sexist.
Particularly for women, they will bear the brunt of looking for the food, looking for the firewood, looking for the place to migrate to when all of the grass is finally gone as the desertification moves south and you have to keep moving your livestock, or your crops are no longer growing, they're burning up in the intense heat that we're now seeing reported across North Africa into the Middle East and into India. Women, once again, will be primarily burdened with the problems of climate change.
Very neat. Roll cataclysmic climate change together with the obvious sexism and misogyny that cost her the election. But Republicans just loved continuing to use Hillary against Democrats in the midterm elections, including Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill.
Hillary supported Obamacare. McCaskill voted for Obamacare. Hillary helped negotiate the Iranian nuclear deal. McCaskill voted for it. Hillary supported higher taxes. McCaskill voted against your tax cut. Hillary lied about her emails. McCaskill lied about her private plane. Hillary called us a basket of deplorables. McCaskill gave Hillary's campaign $49 grand. Hillary Clinton, Claire McCaskill, two of a kind.
McCaskill lost. Then there was the spectacle of Nancy Pelosi defending the gangs of illegal immigrants known as MS-13 who stop at nothing to brutalize their victims, often using machetes to hack their victims to death. In one case, beating a woman to death with 28 blows with a baseball bat. But because Trump dared to call them animals, Pelosi lied by saying the president meant all undocumented people and then defended MS-13's honor.
We're all God's children. There's a spark of divinity in every person on earth, and that we all have to recognize that as we respect the dignity and worth of every person. And so when the President of the United States says about undocumented immigrants, these aren't people, these are animals. You have to wonder, does he not believe in the spark of divinity, the dignity and worth of every person?
Well, as we've seen these last 3.5 years since Trump announced he was running for president, the left takes Trump literally every word and has lost any modicum of a sense of humor. A great example being the respected historian Michael Beschloss reacting to Trump joking about becoming president for life.
One of the ideas that Donald Trump talks about is America first, with this idea that maybe the Chinese will have a sphere of influence, the Russians will have their sphere, we'll have ours. He joked about being president for life. Donald Trump did, said it was a joke. I think we always have to be suspicious that maybe in his mind, this is not such a joke.
Now, these kind of statements all contributed to ever greater hatred and fear of Trump and a new phenomenon advanced by the left, confronting, shaming, and abusing Republicans, high-profile Trump supporters, and conservative media in public spaces like restaurants. It happened to Sarah Sanders, Mitch McConnell, Tucker Carlson, and even lesser-known figures like Kat Timpf of Fox News.
Over the weekend, I was at a bar, and a girl she realized I worked at Fox News, started screaming at me, telling me to get out. I tried to move to a different area of the bar. She kept screaming at me, telling me to get out. I kept trying to say, like, what did I say that you had a problem with? Or maybe I thought it was one of my views that was so offensive. She said it doesn't matter. I don't think she knew a single thing that I ever said on TV. She just knew where I worked, and that was enough for me to be run out of the bar.
We mentioned Hillary Clinton earlier, but the man who was first her apologist, then her tormentor, then her protector again, was the disgraced former FBI Director James Comey, who has transformed from a law enforcement professional into a bitter loser and political partisan who openly urged people to vote Democrat in the midterms. How damaging was his meltdown at the FBI and his refusal, like Hillary, to leave the stage as he continues his public condemnations of the president who fired him? Listen to former FBI Assistant Director James Kallstrom.
If, you looked at a picture of someone who was a narcissist, you'd have Jim Comey's. That would be the picture you'd have in the book. He's an educated nimwit. And he promoted people of his ilk around him, I guess, so, he'd feel like he was still going to be the imperial wizard. The guy is just out of his mind. He has zero support now in the FBI.
But as Comey continued his crusade against President Trump, now beloved by the same leftists who condemned him for costing Hillary Clinton the presidency by reopening the email investigation just before the 2016 election, a breakdown of the New World Order begun under the recently deceased 41st President George H.W. Bush was starting to unravel, not just in the U.S., but in Europe, where French President Emmanuel Macron delivered a broadside against Trump and the nationalist movements that have produced Brexit in England and a national government in Italy and continue to grow across Europe.
Patriotism is the exact opposite of nationalism. Nationalism is a betrayal of patriotism by saying, our interests first, who cares about the others?
Macron, though, has now seen his approval among the French people dropping like a rock. It's now near single digits amid weekend after weekend of violent protests across France. We're back with more Say What. Sit tight. We'll pick up where we left off in just a moment.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Far more important than my political future and far more important than yours, the well-being of our country.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Liberty Nation Radio, syndicated from coast to coast on the Radio America Network, from Washington, D.C. to Seattle, Washington, Knoxville, Tennessee to Lake Havasu, Arizona, from Cadillac, Michigan to Tupelo, Mississippi. We really do appreciate all of you listening across America's fruited plain in the greatest country known to man.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
As we continue with our best of Say What for 2018, there's a tendency to focus on people who are famous or well-known for one reason or another. But one of the most memorable speeches of the year was delivered by the most ordinary of Americans, a big black guy named Mark Robinson, dressing down the city council in Greensboro, North Carolina, on gun control.
I've heard a whole lot of people in here talking tonight about this group and that group and domestic violence and blacks, these minorities and that minority. What I want to know is, when are you all going to start standing up for the majority? And here's who the majority is. I'm the majority.
And Mark Robinson went on to explain logically, with common sense, what the left refuses to, that gun control only victimizes law-abiding citizens.
I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You can take the guns away from us all you want to. You all write a law, I follow the law, I'll bring my guns down here, I'll turn them in. But here's what's going to happen. The Crips and the Bloods on the other side of town, they're not going to turn their guns in. They're going to hold on to them. And what's going to happen when you have to send the police down there to go take them? The police can barely enforce the law as it is. As what I see, we demonize the police, criminalize and vilify the police, and we make the criminals into victims. You're not going to be able to go down here and take these guns from these criminals. So the criminals are going to hold on to their guns. They're still going to have them.
Now, these kind of arguments were countered by those of one of the new heroes on the left, David Hogg, teenager, who, because he happened to be at Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida when that gunman opened fire and killed a bunch of people, nominated himself as the spokesman for gun control. And just listen to the fawning praise showered on Mr. Hogg by Allison Camerata of, who else, CNN, as Hogg attacked Laura Ingraham of Fox News for an insincere apology for criticizing him.
No, she's only apologizing after a third of her advertisers pulled out. And I think it's really disgusting, the fact that she basically tried promoting her show after apologizing to me. I want people to understand, we're not trying to take your guns. We're not against the Second Amendment. We don't want to repeal the Second Amendment.
David, I am stunned that 4 colleges rejected you. What kind of dumbass colleges don't want you? I mean, you've taken the country by storm.
Oh. You're just so impressive. I just can't stand it. You know, there was an old ad about smoking, went something like this. It's enough to make you sick. Isn't it enough to make you stop? But the Second Amendment fared well anyway during midterm elections, even as Democrats took 40 seats and swept into control of the House of Representatives. And even in the high-profile races the Democrats lost, the far-left progressives came frighteningly close to winning. And as leftist political commentator Bakari Sellers observed,
Andrew Gillum and Stacey Abrams and Beto O'Rourke did not lose, right? And I know that they may not have won these particular races, but they fundamentally rebranded the Democratic Party. I mean, Stacey Abrams and Andrew Gillum showed that you could have progressivism and a black idiom, right? Beto O'Rourke showed that if you have this grassroots movement, no matter where you are, if you touch 100 counties in Texas and you take that energy and you're out here showing that you can have not only the Hollywoods and the Willie Nelsons, but you can have the Bubba who drives the truck.
Which brings us to a Democratic field of presidential candidates likely to be as large or larger than the crowded Republican field of 2016. And after Elizabeth Warren made the almost inexplicable decision to actually prove that her Pocahontas nickname was real by taking a DNA test that proved she's actually less of an Indian than the average American citizen, political commentator Scott Jennings summed up the field.
This is where the Democratic Party is. They've got a plagiarizer, a socialist, Spartacus, creepy porn lawyer, and now bizarro Pocahontas running for president. There's no way any of these people.
You've got a serious sexual assaulter.
There's no way they're going to compete with Trump.
Plagiarizer Joe Biden, socialist Bernie Sanders, Spartacus Cory Booker, creepy porn lawyer Michael Avenatti, and bizarro Pocahontas Elizabeth Warren. Good luck with that field. But for many, the story of the year was the confirmation process for Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, which was used as an opening curtain by Kamala Harris and Cory Booker for their inevitable presidential campaigns, and marked by protests stoked by leftists who paid people off the street to enter the Senate chamber and disrupt the proceedings. Listen to a guy who was in line and saw exactly what happened.
There were people that had come along and had a bag of money, and the people would hand them a piece of paper, and then they would give them money. So we knew that money was being exchanged for some of the people to be here just to protest. There was no depth to what their understanding was or anything, and they were actually told, we heard them say this and instruct them, when you go in, we want you to yell, to scream, and even to possibly get arrested.
Tools of the resistance, which is focused not just on Trump, but on open borders, leading to a partial government shutdown. And a member of the House Freedom Caucus, Mark Walker, put it all in perspective.
This has been something that's been discussed the entire year. This is something that President Trump made the foremost kingpin foundation of his entire campaign and running for president. I think the time to deliver is now. Republicans, we have to be smart. We also have to have an exit plan of what this looks like long term. We want to make sure government employees are taken care of. But this is a hill that we should be willing to die on.
A hill we should be willing to die on, and a mighty hill to climb. We save the best or worst or most revealing statement for last. A short soundbite that reveals the not-so-hidden agenda of the resistance and unmasks their hopes of regulating speech, expanding the definition of hate speech, abridging the First Amendment. This is from Congressman Ted Lieu of Hawaii.
I would love to be able to regulate the content of speech. The First Amendment prevents me from doing so.
If only there wasn't that damn First Amendment. So there it is, one man's admittedly incomplete, but hopefully entertaining and enlightening compilation of the most wacky, astonishing, and damnable things uttered by politicians in the chattering class in this year of our Lord 2018. Quick break, and then we're back with 2018's most underreported and underrated stories affecting your individual liberty.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner. This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Just talking loud, just say nothing.
And now we welcome you back to the concluding segment of the concluding show, our year-end edition 2018, as we welcome in our regular contributor, constitutional lawyer, and LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, Scott Cosenza. Hello, Scott.
Saving the best for last, Tim. I appreciate it
very
much.
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something like that. Now, Scott's going to go over what he considers the 5 most significant but overlooked stories affecting individual liberty in 2018. So, Scott, let's jump right in. And you put at the head of your list something that I wouldn't, but it is curious because there's 2 different angles on it. And it is the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, abandoning free speech. Why?
Why did they do it, or why is it important?
Why is it at the top of your list?
Okay. It's at the top of my list, Tim, because I think that the First Amendment is what guarantees our freedom of speech, and it's first for a reason. Without the freedom to think or to speak freely, we don't have the ability to think freely. That's why those who wish to who control our thinking want to control our speech. And this really abandonment of the cause by the ACLU, I believe it's unfortunately just in the craven pursuit of money, but perhaps I'm wrong about that. Perhaps there are ideological or other reasons why they've done so. But as I see it, they see free speech as a loser in terms of their fundraising. Because in order today, in 2018, to support free speech, what you have to do is you have to support Alex Jones, you have to support Milo Yiannopoulos, you have to support Sargon of Akkad, all these people who are being...
and even Ann Coulter.
And even Ann Coulter, and the people who will pay to have marchies, to defend marchies to march in Skokie will not pay or open up their wallets to help the ACLU defend those people. And so what we've got is when, for instance, Milo was banned at Berkeley, or when Charles Murray was physically assaulted at Middlebury on our college campuses, which is typically the most robust exchange of ideas, where freedom of speech has to be, blossomed and really tended to, I think. They say either very little or nothing, or very far after the fact. There's a tepid statement, that sort of...
But there was a specific thing that they did regarding new rules set out by the Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos, that really got your attention.
Well, we're going to get into that. And just one other thing, which is, so what they did instead of those things, Tim, was they focused on these travel restrictions, as if somehow a Yemenese citizen who wishes to travel to the United States for purposes we don't know about, that's somehow more important for liberty in America, that their travel rights and the extension of those travel rights in a way that the founders never even envisioned is somehow more core to this than you and I having this conversation right now.
Well, to boot, there are no travel rights for people who are not citizens. There's no travel rights for them, but they spoke out, the ACLU specifically, against due process in universities that had been riven by political correctness over a period of years. They didn't just ignore it,
they
but
said
they spoke out against it.
There is too much due process. By the way,
there you go.
Now, by and large, men we're talking about here. Anybody can be accused of sexual misconduct on the university settings, but the cases that we read about that are the most abusive typically involve men who are accused of wrongdoing by females and who are then subject to, what would we call it, a star chamber, kangaroo court, whatever your favorite pejorative is.
Why don't we just put it this way, that you're basically considered guilty until proven innocent, and yet you don't even get the chance to prove your innocence because you're condemned before any sort of due process.
It's sort of like without the murder or torture, like a Viet Cong sort of thing. Sometimes there's re-education involved. There's all sorts of anti-free speech, anti-liberty components to it. And Betsy DeVos, the hero in our story, in the Trump administration, reversed course of the Obama administration and told these colleges that they are actually expected to give all of their students due process in their judicial proceedings.
I guess we'll conclude this number one story by saying, when it comes to free speech and defending free speech, if not the ACLU, who?
Exactly that.
Number two, the $15 minimum wage. Now, certainly you don't object to a living wage for our American workers, do you, Scott? The Grinch.
Right. That's how you put it. I think that the number of people, so the $15 minimum wage and the major minimum wage growth, that the push for that we've seen in these past couple years, I think it is inestimable how much damage this does to the very Americans that they would say it tries to help. Those people who aren't, who are genuine in their. I mean, there are certainly some who understand what they're doing, and what they're doing is, if your labor is not worth $15 an hour, you just don't get to sell it.
Right.
So if you can only generate in excess of $12.50 for the excess labor that you're willing to, that you can provide, you don't get a job. And who does that hurt, Tim? Does it hurt rich white guys with advanced degrees? No, it doesn't hurt them. It hurts the very people these proponents often say they're trying to work hardest for.
That is a product of the minimum wage economy of the Obama years.
If you have lots of full-time employees, what can you do to reduce your costs? If that's the law and the regulation, well, now you reduce them.
Now, number 3 and number 4 on your list are distinct from one another, but I'm going to roll them together because the fact that you have them back-to-back in the top 5 by itself is significant. Number 3 on your list is the New Jersey magazine ban, and I don't mean like Time and Newsweek. I mean gun magazines. And bump stocks is number 4, the abolition thereof.
Well, I would oppose a ban, even though they're bad magazines, on Time and Newsweek as well, on First Amendment grounds. But So we have in New Jersey, they passed a ban on ammunition magazines that hold, I think it's 11 rounds or more. And they created hundreds of thousands, if not 1 million felons in New Jersey overnight. We've seen the reports come in now that there's not a single instance that the state police can say of somebody actually turning in a magazine. Now, some of those people took them out of state, but with one fell swoop, people who were good citizens, honorable citizens, salt-of-the-earth type people you'd want in your state, and the next day they're felons based on the legislature and a court's interpretation. And I think that is massively anti-liberty. As a former resident, it's sort of my home state. I claim several sort of states, but that's really where I've spent most of my youth. And it's really disappointing. On the same side of the coin, you have the bump stock ban with Trump signing his pen to the ban to include basically redefine something as a machine gun. A bump stock was never a machine gun. And with this signature, he just basically said, okay, the ATF's now going to consider this a machine gun. So even though a decade ago, they gave all the certifications when people checked and said, okay, we're making sure this is legal, right? So we can own them and we can set up companies to produce them. And they said, yes, there's no money's giving for these bump stocks. There's no the companies that have to shut down who made them. It's massively anti-liberty. It's exactly like a dictator could do, only it's done in the United States. And I think they're both similar stories because they involve gun and gun parts. And I think they're massive infringements on liberty that really can't stand in a free society where the president can just say, okay, you now own that, you're going to jail.
Last on your list of the top 5 is the Kansas Supreme Court saying cops can search your home without a warrant if they claim it smells like marijuana.
So I thought this story is a news story, Tim, from this week, and I saw it pop up, and I thought one of the stories that I wanted to use for our big important stories of the year is the marijuana story. And there's not really one that totally encapsulates it, but I thought this would be helpful. And so in Kansas, where marijuana is still very much illegal at the state level, we have another instance where the courts are ceding to the drug warriors more and more freedom, okay? Here we had a guy who had marijuana in a safe, in a closet, marijuana was in a closed bag, inside a closed safe, inside a closed closet, inside a closed house. And a cop said they smelled marijuana from the door. Maybe the front door of the house was open. They were able to search according to now what is the legal ruling from the Kansas Supreme Court. They were legally able, because one police officer said they smelled marijuana, to go into the house and search without a warrant. And I think that it is just showing how we have two tracks now of these places where marijuana is legal and these places where it's not, and the drug war is continuing to ratchet down. The man who was convicted, and I don't know his name in the Kansas case, is going to spend 2 years in prison for less than an ounce of weed. An amount of marijuana that in any of these non-prescription states, they wouldn't, to say that they wouldn't go to prison at all, it's just a buy your leave. Have a nice day. Go ahead and, thank you for the state's tax cut. And yet in some states, people are, their lives are ruined over this.
Okay, last question, and you just get to say better, worse, or the same as an answer. How would you define the state of individual liberty in the United States of America on December 31st, 2018, compared to January 1st of this year?
Worse.
Thank you, Scott. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Tim.
And Happy New Year to you, and a blessed 2018, the few days that are left, and 2019. A reminder that this program, Liberty Nation Radio Plus, Liberty Nation's own podcast, The Uprising, hosted by me and Scott and Lisa K. Donner, are available to you on demand anytime, anywhere, at LibertyNation.com and from fine podcast providers everywhere. So that is it for this week, but we'll be back at you next week in 2019. Same time, same station. Till then, this is Tim Donner saying stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.